Americans don't just buy things, they buy everything. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the entire global economy quietly depends on what Americans put into their shopping carts. Americans make up about 4% of the world's population, yet we're responsible for roughly 1/3 of all consumer spending on Earth. That's not a typo. One country, a tiny slice of humanity, carrying the weight of global demand. Once you really see how deep this goes, you'll never look at an Amazon box, a Target run, or a Black Friday sale the same way again. Today we're breaking down why Americans are the biggest consumers on the planet, how this system was built on purpose, who benefits from it, who quietly pays the price, and what happens if the best consumers on Earth suddenly can't afford to keep consuming. There's one turning point in this story that permanently rewired the global economy, and people don't really talk about it. Let's start with something kind of small that explains something huge. Walk into any American grocery store and look at the milk aisle. Whole, skim, almond, oat, soy, lactose-free, organic, grass-fed, vanilla-flavored, extra protein, shelf-stable. In many countries, milk is just milk. In the US, choice itself is the product. And it's not just milk. Walk down any aisle and you see the same pattern. Toothpaste? Hundreds of options. Toilet paper? Quilted, strong, ultra-soft, scented. Soap? Bar, liquid, exfoliating, organic, vegan. Even snacks and cereal are multiplied into dozens of varieties. The culture of choice is baked into every shelf, every display, every ad. Americans spend over $18 trillion every single year on goods and services. That's more than China, Japan, Germany, India, and the UK combined. On average, an American household spends around $70,000 a year, and a massive chunk of that goes toward things that aren't strictly necessary. Bigger homes, bigger cars, faster phones, clothes worn once, food that ends up in the trash. And yet, this didn't happen by accident. After World War II, the United States found itself in a position no other country had ever been in. Europe and Asia were rebuilding from rubble, factories destroyed, infrastructure gone. Meanwhile, American factories were untouched and running at full speed. We had built a massive industrial machine to win a war. And suddenly the war was over. Planes, tanks, ships, steel, appliances. America could produce all of it faster and cheaper than anyone else. The problem wasn't supply. The problem was demand. Policymakers asked a simple but dangerous question. How do you keep factories running when people already have what they need? The answer changed everything. You turn consumption into a lifestyle. Advertising exploded. Not just buy this, but buy this to feel complete, to be modern, to be part of the American dream. Suburbs expanded. Car ownership became mandatory. Credit cards entered everyday life. Instead of saving first and buying later, Americans were trained to buy now and figure it out later. Spending wasn't just normal, it was encouraged. Sometimes openly patriotic. Presidents literally told people to shop to keep the economy alive. And it worked, almost too well. By the 1970s and 80s, the American consumer wasn't just fueling the US economy. They were fueling the entire world. Now think about when you're buying something as simple as a t-shirt. When you buy a $10 t-shirt in the US, that money doesn't stay in the US. The cotton might come from India, the fabric woven in Vietnam, the shirt stitched in Bangladesh, shipped across oceans, sold in an American store. That one small purchase supports farmers, factory workers, shipping companies, ports, and entire national economies. This is why countries like China, Vietnam, Mexico, and South Korea built their growth strategies around a single idea: sell to Americans. At one point, nearly 1/3 of China's economic growth depended directly on American consumers. If Americans slow down, factories overseas shut down. Jobs disappear. Shipping volumes collapse. Entire economies wobble. That's the power of the American consumer. But, actually, Americans don't just consume more. They consume on debt. Total U.S. consumer debt is now over $17 trillion. Credit cards, auto loans, student loans, medical debt, buy now, pay later plans quietly stacking up balances people barely notice. High-risk, high-interest consumer lending alone has crossed $1 trillion, and that doesn't even count mortgages. This makes the system incredibly fragile. As long as people feel confident, they will keep spending. But once people decide they're going to save or not spend as much, this is where you start to see job losses, inflation, rising interest rates. Consumption slows. When American consumption slows, the shockwaves travel worldwide. Yeah, we saw this in 2008. The crisis started with US housing and consumer debt, but it didn't stay local. Factories in Asia shut down. Global trade collapsed. Oil prices crashed. Entire countries entered recession because American consumers pulled back. That was the moment the world quietly realized something terrifying. The global economy was addicted to American spending. And instead of fixing that, the system doubled down. Now think about what people are doing today. Americans consume more meat, more energy, more fast fashion, more electronics, and more entertainment than almost anyone else on Earth. The average American uses 5 times more resources than the global average. Over 30% of all food in the US is thrown away. Perfectly edible. Why? Because abundance became normal. When shelves are always full, value disappears. When upgrades come every year, patience disappears. When ads follow you everywhere, desire never shuts off. Social media poured gasoline on the fire. Consumption stopped being about utility and became about identity. Being seen owning things matters almost as much as owning them. But this endless consumption comes with real costs. Environmentally, the footprint is massive. More extraction, more waste, more emissions. If everyone lived like the average American, we'd need 5 Earths to sustain it. Economically, it creates deep inequality. Cheap goods usually mean cheap labor somewhere else. Low prices often come from long hours, low wages, and unsafe conditions overseas. The American consumer saves money, but someone else quietly pays the price. Psychologically, it doesn't even deliver happiness. Study after study shows that once basic needs are met, more stuff doesn't make people happier. Yet the cycle never stops. Buy. Feel good briefly. Get bored. Buy again. Despite all this spending, many Americans are struggling. Nearly 80% of households in major cities like New York are considered housing burdened, meaning more than 30% of income goes to rent. Housing, healthcare, and transportation, things you can't easily avoid, keep getting more expensive, while consumer goods get cheaper. That's the paradox consumerism created. Luxury and convenience became cheap, but everyday life became expensive. The data backs this up. The bottom 20% of households actually spend more than they earn each year just to survive. Not on luxury, on survival. Debt fills the gap. And debt doesn't just fund consumption. It changes behavior. Workers with high debt are less likely to quit, less likely to demand raises, and more likely to work overtime. Debt makes the system run smoother, at a human cost. At the same time, the economy is becoming more dependent on a smaller group of people. The top 10% of earners now drive a bigger share of consumer spending than ever before, because they're the only ones who can reliably afford high-margin non-essentials. Even many high-income earners are living paycheck to paycheck because the system is incredibly good at finding new ways to extract money. Advertising alone now represents about 5% of US GDP. That's how refined this machine has become. The world needs Americans to spend, but Americans can't keep spending like this forever. If consumption slows, global growth slows. If consumption continues, debt deepens, inequality grows, and environmental damage accelerates. It's a trap that doesn't have an easy way out. Governments know this. That's why stimulus checks exist. That's why interest rates get cut. That's why leaders panic when consumer confidence drops. The modern economy isn't driven by production anymore. It's driven by shopping. And Americans are the engine. And if you think about it, things are kind of changing. Younger generations are spending differently. Less on houses, more on experiences, more secondhand shopping, more awareness of waste. At the same time, inflation, high interest rates, and unstable jobs are forcing people to cut back. Credit is expensive. Rent is brutal. Groceries hurt. The endless spending power that built the modern world is no longer guaranteed. And that leads to a key turning point. If the American consumer truly changes, spends less, saves more, demands durability instead of disposability, the entire global system will have to adapt. Factories will shift. Supply chains will shrink. Growth models will break and rebuild. That transition would be painful. But it might also be necessary. Because no system built on infinite consumption can survive on a finite planet. So yeah, Americans ended up as the world's top consumers. That didn't come from one decision. It came from decades of small choices, smart marketing, easy credit, and a system that always pushed people to spend a little more. Eventually, consumption became the glue holding the economy together. The problem with building everything on spending is that it only works as long as people can keep spending. And right now, that assumption is being tested. Instead of worrying why Americans spend so much, we might want to start thinking about how the world will actually cope if they start spending differently. Because if the engine slows, nothing else moves the same way. Factories, jobs, supply chains, even global trade policies will all have to rethink how they operate. The shopping cart became the backbone of the world economy, and how long it keeps rolling depends on the choices of every American walking into a store or scrolling through Amazon today.